Joining us now here on the Rich Eisen Show, I have lots of questions for this reporter who crushed it and has been crushing it on the story du jour in Major League Baseball with Shohei Ohtani, Tisha Thompson. How are you, Tisha? Pleasure to chat.
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. Let's just start with it. When did you first catch wind that something might be up with Shohei Ohtani and his interpreter?
Let's just say several months ago. You know, I have to be careful that I protect my sources, and I can tell you we knew as early as January that these wire transfers existed.
And so when did you first get a copy of anything that had Shohei Ohtani's name on it? And I guess it was spelled as the way that without the H, correct?
Exactly. So I have seen 2 wire transfers, both for $500,000. One was from September of 2023, so last September, and one was for October of 2023. They both had Shohei Ohtani on them from that bank account as the sender, and the name did not have an H in it. So you can imagine one of the first things we did was sort of dig into, does he use that name? And we have since been told by multiple sources, including Ippei Mizuhara, that that is the name he uses as his legal name. It's on his passport, it's on his driver's license, and it's on his bank accounts. And
obviously then it would lend a little bit more credence to the fact that it was in fact him, or coming from him, or from his bank account, or from his computer. And I'm sure that might have lent a little bit more, one would think, standing for you to eventually now reach out to the Ohtani camp. Would you say that?
I can tell you that the thing that we can say for sure is that Shohei Ohtani's name is on the wire transfers. Now, the question, of course, is who sent them? That is the question.
That is absolutely the question.
Yes.
So now let's, because it's obviously not something any journalist wants to do, is to suddenly be part of the story. And I'm not saying you are part of the story, but the fact that the first story you received from Ohtani's camp was with the interpreter was one thing, and then the story that came from Ohtani's camp after the interpreter spoke was another thing, which now is part of the story as far as I'm concerned. So I'd love to start here with you now. And so when you reached out on Tuesday, walk me through who you reached out to and how the interpreter wound up speaking to you.
Well, we published a story on Friday that I really recommend folks read if they've not read it yet. And so if you follow along, we call it a TikTok, not like the app, but it's like a timeline. It's a journalism lingo for us laying out what happened when and how we learned it. And as you follow through that story, you'll see we began reaching out to Ohtani's agent, and then we're connected with a crisis communication spokesperson. That's very normal if you have the kind of allegations that we were dealing with here. And so that was not a surprising thing to me. And we had we went through a course of conversation, trying to understand what happened, waiting for answers. And Tuesday-ish in the afternoon, we began to get word that Ippei Mizuhara would do an interview with me. And I was on the East Coast, so roughly around 10:30 at night, we did a 90-minute interview with Mizuhara, with Ohtani's crisis spokesperson listening to the interview.
And that's where he said Ohtani was bailing him out, essentially, from his own gambling problems. Tisha?
Well, so the way I interview sometimes, but oftentimes, is to say, so what happened? And I say, and then what happened? And then what happened? And so through the course of this pretty long, detailed interview, Mizuhara laid out that he had met the bookmaker at the center of all of this at a poker game after a Padres game in San Diego at the hotel room, or not the hotel room, I should say, at the hotel. And he proceeded to be extended credit by the bookmaker and began to place bets. And he, I obviously asked on baseball, and he denied, no, not baseball. He knew the rules about baseball, but the bets were on other things, including international soccer, domestic football, both pro and college, and professional basketball. So we continue to talk. I continue to ask questions. He explained he got deeper and deeper into debt. He was making roughly $85,000 when he was with the Angels, when he starts betting. By the time he and Ohtani go to the Dodgers, he's making somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000. He didn't want to disclose how much he was making. I told him we had sourcing that said it was somewhere in that range, and he confirmed that. So, his salary is changing, but he's getting deeper and deeper into a hole, according to his story. And at some point, he goes to Ohtani, and this is according to the first version of events that he tells me, because, of course, now we know that there will be a second version of events that I get the next day. But in this first version of events, he says that he goes to Ohtani, tells him that he's in financial trouble. Ohtani does not like it, but Ohtani offers to pay off the debts. And I then proceed to ask a number of questions. I wanted to know, how do you wire money to a bookmaker? How does that happen? Who did it? And it's through those series of questions and answers that I begin to get details where Mizuhara says that it was Ohtani who logged into his computer and made the payments. And Mizuhara says it was 8 to 9 payments of about $500,000 each. That matched sourcing that I had for the wire transfers. I had only seen 2, but I had been told it was at least $4.5 million. And then, of course, the next day we get a different version of events. Okay,
so here's some follow-ups. Because I've been speaking to a lot of people around here who are familiar with this sort of activity, to use that phrase, and they're wondering how in the world somebody who is making as little as Mizuhara could get so deep in that hole. And so you're saying that there was credit extended by the bookmaker to the interpreter?
According to Mizuhara, it was credit extended. He never cashed out, and he just continued to make bets.
And the credit was extended in. Now, did he say why that the bookmaker knew Ohtani was behind him? Because that's the reason why it might make sense for somebody who makes as little to get credit extended by a bookmaker.
We are trying to get to the bottom of that very question, because you're not the only one, and the folks who listen and watch your show are not the only one who want to understand how someone making $85,000 would be extended credit like that. Now, what I have been told by folks who know this business very, very well is if you pay your bills, you continue to get to bet.
And the bills were being paid in a timely manner. Do we know when the 8-9 payments were that Ohtani found out? Because again, if it got too deep in a hole that Mizuhara had to give up the ghost to Ohtani, right? And again, I know this version of events has been completely washed over, but this is the first version of events that was delivered to you with a member of the crisis management PR team listening in. And so the question I would have then is that, so when did Ohtani know? How deep was Mizuhara in by the time Ohtani would know and start delivering payments to allow Mizuhara to keep betting, right? Or that's not the timeline?
In the second version, or not the second version, but in the second interview that I do with Mizuhara, he says Ohtani never knew about his gambling debts. In the first interview I did with him, he said he went to Ohtani in 2023. I have sourcing that correlates with that the payments, the wire transfers were made in 2023.
Okay. And then you said moments ago that at least $4.5 million. Is it possible there's more money than $4.5 million that was paid out by Ohtani, Tisha?
Right now we're reporting that it's at least $4.5 million.
Okay. So now you conduct this interview, and then you print this story. What happens next?
A lot of questions.
Yeah. No, what I mean is you print the initial story. What happens next that now you hear from Ohtani's camp that, he was robbed. So
let me just clarify one thing.
Please.
We did that initial interview, and we were very close to publishing a story based on what we were told in that initial interview with Mizuhara and what I had collected through multiple sources and document. We did not publish that first account alone. We ended up getting a phone call. I mean, we were really close to publishing, and we ended up getting a phone call, frankly, a series of phone calls very quickly saying, hold on. I'm paraphrasing. Hold on.
Right.
And something has happened.
How fast after your initial interview was conducted and you hung up from the interpreter and the crisis management PR person hung up? Okay.
It was some time. So I concluded the interview with Mizuhara roughly around midnight on the East Coast.
Yep.
And to put that into context, I mean, for folks who are just sort of, catching up right now, this was happening in the hours before the season opener for the Dodgers in South Korea. So for me, it was midnight. But in South Korea, where Mizuhara and much of Ohtani's support staff, including the Dodgers and Ohtani himself, it was in the morning leading up to that Dodgers game, which would be played later in the afternoon in South Korea.
Yeah, that's the reason why I ask about the time frame between you conducting your interview initial and then getting a statement. No, Ohtani was robbed. Is they played a baseball game and everybody saw Mizuhara in the dugout, chit-chatting with Ohtani, and they're mixing it up like nothing had ever happened. And it's another head scratcher of this whole thing. So that's why I asked. You can imagine
what it was like to be me at 6 a.m. watching the two of them in the dugout.
Yeah. So what was it like to be you when you're watching that?
I've been a reporter a long time, and people react in very different ways, and nothing surprises me anymore. Let's just say that. So I was watching it. I was noting it. I was taking pictures on my phone of the two of them interacting off of my screen, like a reporter does. And I was writing about it. I was actively writing the story when that game was taking place. It's a couple hours after that game is taking place as we are, putting the final touches on our story and remain in communication with Ohtani's spokesperson, that we get this statement from Ohtani's attorneys saying that there had been massive theft. Now, that is very different than the interview I had done. And so we make phone calls. You better believe we start making phone calls. And of course, one of my very first phone calls, and forgive me, it might have been my first phone call, was to Mizuhara. And he didn't immediately pick up, but he eventually does pick up the phone and proceeds to answer a series of questions that I ask that are very yes or no kind of questions at this point, because he wasn't nearly as forthcoming as he had been the night before. And so this was me starting with the question. First I read him the statement and I said, what is your response? And I didn't get a whole lot. And I said, Ippei, did you lie to me in that interview? And he says, yes. And that's when I get into this yes, no. And you can read the details of some of those yes, no questions in our story that we published on Friday. And you can see, I'm asking, is someone paying you to say this? Or, have you made some kind of agreement to say this? And he says, no. But I also say, was there, confusion, or did you purposely misinterpret? I don't know if that's the right word, but did you purposefully tell Ohtani something differently than what his representatives had said in English, and vice versa? Did you say something differently than what Ohtani said in Japanese to his English representation, like his agent or, lawyers or something like that? And he said, no, he had never done that. He had never interpreted anything incorrectly.
Wow. So, because the thing I don't understand, and that I'd love to get answered, and I'm wondering if you've gotten any answers on this front, is how it's not like you're just zelling $100. You know what I'm saying? To a friend. You're not Venmoing and putting in the notes that everyone can see. This sort of money that even if it is Ohtani sending it, you can't just wire $500,000 to somebody without a bank noticing or calling up or having some sort of an alarm bell set off. And then certainly if somebody's just wiring the money from a computer, I mean, there's got to be a code at the very least. You know what I mean? There could even be, over the 7th or 8th time, a banking representative that needs to be on the phone. Like, what's the nuts and bolts of the wiring process? What are the answers that you've gotten on that front?
As you can imagine, the investigative unit at ESPN, and I think a lot of other people are asking those questions to financial experts, but there's really only a very small group of people who will know the answer to that. And that is the people who deal with Ohtani's bank accounts and the people in Ohtani's circle. I will say, and this is just a general statement, this is not specific to Ohtani's banking. I will say, wealthy people operate in a different universe, and he's one of the wealthiest people in sports. They operate in a different universe. So my recommendation would be to folks, who don't have $500,000 to wire 8 or 9 times, over the course of the year. Don't take your experiences and apply them here. I think we're dealing in rarefied air.
Well, I mean, that means there are handlers, right? I mean, there's got to.
We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure it out.
And in that,
obviously, we're reporting this as we're reporting out, and when we have stuff that we can. We have journalistic standards. We are not going to just report rumors and speculation and innuendo. I mean, that's not what we do at the ESPN investigative unit. That's not what I do. And so when we have solid information that meets our journalistic standards, we're going to publish it. And
then is it, in the couple minutes I have left with you, Tisha Thompson of ESPN here, your latest story. Are you just like cold calling agencies and just saying, hey, are you investigating Ohtani and, or Mizuhara? And has Ohtani pressed charges? And with who? What's the deal there?
I can't take all the credit. I work with a phenomenal journalist named Paula Levine, and Paula and I have been investigative reporters for a long time, and we always follow up on what we're told. And we have been obviously reaching out to every agency that we know over, multiple decades of doing this job that would investigate these kinds of allegations. And you can read what people have said back to us in our story that we just published yesterday.
Okay. And so do we know if charges have been pressed? Has he pressed a charge officially anywhere?
Ohtani's representatives will not answer that question.
Okay.
And I have been asking that question, as you can imagine, nearly every day.
Okay. So then my last question for you is, where do things stand in your estimation right now?
With what? There's so much.
Where do things stand on where's Mizuhara now? I guess where is he?
That's a good question.
Okay,
that's a good question.
We don't know where he is.
He has not responded to my texts and phone calls.
Okay, and we don't know who is in fact looking into him for criminal behavior. We don't know that.
We do know that the IRS and Homeland Security are investigating, but we don't know if it is specifically with the allegations of theft.
Okay. And then my last one.
I refer people to the article because it really gets into the nitty-gritty of that.
And then I will ask the question that I think you will respect me asking, which is, is there anything I haven't asked that I should have?
Oh, that's my favorite question. I always ask that question.
I figured you'd appreciate it. So
yes, I always ask that question. Of course, there's lots going on. There's lots swirling in my brain right now, and I'm not done. I have a lot more reporting to do.
Okay, Tisha, thank you for the Zoom, and look for more of my my emails and requests for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. That's Tisha Thompson of ESPN right here. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.